Hey guys, so this video is about the daily page within the Omnis Analytics dashboard, and the daily page is the highest level view, right? Meaning it's not session specific. It's looking at the full trading day and answering questions about daily extremes, prior day level interactions and session hit rates, right? At the top of the page here we can see a bunch of key cards which are split into different sections there, but the first thing we really want to cast our eye on is the sample size, right? And that refers to well, it tells us how many trading days are in the current filtered data set, right? Now, if we've applied multiple filters, this is obviously going to reduce as we prune out scenarios, right? And so it's worth remembering that if this drops to 20 or 30, our percentages become less statistically meaningful. And we really need to keep this in mind as we interpret the data that's offered from the dashboard itself, right? Now, these top level, or the top row of these key cards here are to do with the prior day levels. So here we have the percentage of the days that price did revisit the previous day's high. Consistently high rate means that the previous day high is a high probability target on most days. Here we have the previous day low, and it's the same thing here, right? We use both together to understand whether the market tends to sweep both sides or remain one directional on some days. The mid cross is how often the mid price is crossed between the previous day's high and low. The mid acts as a balance point. Crossing it may often signal a directional commitment for the day. And the last two here is the settlement price, right? How often of the previous day's official settlement price was revisited? Settlement is a key institutional, reference point, right? And the same applies to the Globex Open. The price at which Asia opened at, the 1800, can get revisited later that day. The second row refers to the previous day's session levels, right? The individual session levels of the previous day. Each of these tells us how often the prior day sessions extremes get revisited. These are discrete liquidity pools. New York 1 extremes carry particular weight as they represent the highest volume periods of that day. NY2 level is approximate reference point for the overnight and for London sessions. So just as we kind of move from left to right, we can see these labeled out here, right? Previous day London high, previous day London low, previous day New York 1 high, New York 1 low, and New York 2. So we can kind of think of it like this, right? Before each session, it's worth glancing at these cards with our current filters applied, to see if the previous day high is, for example, sitting at 75%. That's a statistically meaningful level to have on our charts. Price has demonstrated a tendency to come back to it. And the third row refer to the current day's session levels and their extreme hit rates and model integrity, right? So here we have Asia mid broken, which refers to the Asia model status, Asia high taken, Asia low taken, the London mid broken, in other words, its model status, the London high taken and the London low taken. We must remember that the model status or Asia mid-broken, London mid-broken, they can only break after that session is completed. So Asia can't break during Asia, but it can break during London, New York. And London can't break during Asia because London hasn't happened, can't break during London because it's still in play, and therefore can only break during New York 1 and New York 2. So with respect to the London mid being broken, in other words, its model status, if we're looking at how often London model was broken, a high hit rate here could indicate or indicates that New York 1 or New York 2 frequently disrupts London's directional structure. The same can be said for the Asia model status, right, in terms of whether it's hit during London, New York 1 or New York 2. If we want more information, I'm just going to make this a bit busier. about what in each of the squares on the heat map are, we can just scroll over it and we get the pop-up there, which shows us the time slot, where it is on the range, the actual high-low, and the probability of that, right? Same wherever we go for the high and for the low. Okay. Yeah, so the next section I want us to look at are the daily price distributions that's underneath the live chart, right? So what this refers to is the higher day and lower day. The green obviously relating to the higher day, and the red referring to the daily lows. We can see that there's a dashed line here on each, which refers to the median, and then there are two other lines that, which are the 30th and 70th percentiles, right? Now we can change the appearance of this graph, as we can see here. This is kind of, the histograms are represented vertically. We can look at that horizontally if we want to, by clicking this icon with the 4 there. And we can see that we have the same thing, the high from the 0 point and the low from the 0 point. And as we mouse over these, we can see the level at which it is. For example, 0.1% to 0.2, and as we come through, we can see it increasing there for the lows, and equally for the highs. We can see the probability of that being hit. So obviously the between 0 and 0.10 is 100%, because obviously that's where we're opening, and the same for the lower day. And as we come across, we can see that probability decreasing. I'm referring to the green probability in the bottom right hand corner of the pop-up that appears, and the same here for the low, except it's red. From that we can also infer that as we come up through these, how much of that higher day probability has been eaten into, right? So let's say, maybe we can do it the other way. Let's say from the, that we are sort of coming into areas, we can see, like at this point, right, there's a 20% chance of price reaching that level. So we could infer that actually 80% of the lows are also gone in that given scenario. So just to come back to this, because I want to talk a bit more about the 30th and 70th percentiles and median, right? So what does the median tell us? Well, it's the middle value. Half of all days had a daily high below this level, half above. The 30th and 70th percentile lines show us where the middle 40% of the outcomes fall. Think of this as your normal range. Days that push beyond the 70th percentile are statistically above average moves. If we want to change the bin size, we can also do that, right? So, 0.5, 0.05, 0.1, 0.15, and 0.2. The same thing here, right? 0.05, 0.1, 0.15, and 0.2. The next section is the time distributions, right, of the higher day, lower day. The higher day is above and it's in green as normal, and the lower day is below and in red. Let me just reset this, actually reset here also. We can see from this, these histograms show when during the day the daily high and the low most frequently form. It's in 15-minute buckets as a default, but we can change to 10, we can change to 5, or we can even come out to 30 minutes, and it spans the whole day. Asia open is here, and kind of starts at this point, 1800. Midnight is to the left hand side here. It's just the way this is showing at the moment. And we can see, if we mouse over any of the distributions, we can see what time slot that falls into. The low down here, the high up here, and actually just visually we can see that normally the higher day comes at the end of the session, and the lower the day, the same. Most of it is at the end of the day rather. Around 9:30 we can get the higher day and lower day forming at those times. Now this is completely unfiltered. If I just apply some filtering, let's have a look how things change. So, you know, even just after some basic filtering, we can see how that shifted the higher day, to the 9:30 open from the end of the day, and the opposite happened for the low of the day. So I'll just come back here. So, you know, there's not so much difference there from the unfiltered. Yes, we do have the filters above, and you know, London long, just what false, sorry, not London long, New York 1 long, and just what the implication of false that can be on affecting the probabilities of both higher day and lower day. So just watch as I filter that out. There's a shift, right? So we can see the shift: true, false, true, false, true. And the next section is the daily range, right? So this is a histogram of the total days range from its low to its high, expressed as a percentage. I use this to calibrate stop sizing, profit targets relative to the historical norms. If today's range is already at the 70th percentile and it's only 10 a.m., for example, statistically the remaining range has largely been consumed, right? Again, the 30th percentile, 70th percentile, and median, right? And here we have it. So the buckets are 0.1%, and if we mouse over it, we get to see that in large, right? I use the measuring tool on TradingView, and I'm kind of, you know, adjusting that relative to, you know, to what might be, and I kind of like the median to mode as something I can look for, but obviously the extremes are something, the percentiles is something that I look at as well. Yeah, so the next graph that we can look at, or visualization, is a little bit more on the Hodlod time and magnitude or heat map, right? So I just to reset everything. So this is a two-dimensional heat map showing the joint distribution of when the daily high or low forms on the x-axis to how far it extends as a percentage on the y-axis, right? The brighter cells indicate more frequent combinations. So obviously we have the higher day here and the lower day, right? So this potentially answers the question: when price is at X%, extended by time on just here, how often does that combination appear, right? You know, where there's a blank, there's nothing, by the way. So, you know, it can help us gauge whether an in-progress move is still within typical bounds, or have we pushed into rare territory. And the same for the lower day, right? If you remember some moments ago, we actually embedded this chart on top of the live today's chart, right? If you remember, we had it here. So that concludes the video on the daily page within the Omnis Analytics dashboard. The next video that we'll put out will be to cover the sessions. We'll have a similar format where I go through and explain what each of the points are. We kind of see a sort of similarity across the pages. In other words, we'll have a live chart which is just, you know, with respect to the session in question, London, and New York 1 and so on. And similarly for the price distributions of that session, you know, and the ranges as well, session ranges, OR ranges, etc. But you know, come back for the next video where all that will be explained. Thank you very much.